What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what he thinks is a friendly interview, only to find himself in the crosshairs of a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? The explosive confrontation between Michael B. Jordan and Joy Behar on The View left audiences stunned and social media buzzing for days. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because you're not going to believe what went down. The studio lights were blazing as Michael B. Jordan settled into the familiar semicircle of chairs on The View set. The actor, fresh off promoting his latest directorial project, appeared relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be the usual promotional circuit conversation. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Sunny Hostin, offered warm smiles and welcoming energy. But Joy Behar sat with a different demeanor, her expression already carrying an edge that would soon become unmistakable. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi announced to the cameras. "We're here with the incredibly talented Michael B. Jordan, actor, director, and producer. Michael, thanks for being with us today." "Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here," Michael responded with his characteristic charm, flashing that smile that had won over millions of fans worldwide. The conversation started innocuously enough. Sarah Haynes asked about his latest film, and Michael dove into discussing the creative process with genuine enthusiasm. "You know, stepping behind the camera has given me a whole new perspective on storytelling. I wanted to tell stories that matter, stories that represent voices that don't always get heard in Hollywood." Sunny Hostin nodded approvingly. "That's something we really appreciate about your work, Michael. You've consistently chosen projects that have social relevance." But then Joy Behar leaned forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift. "Speaking of social relevance," she interjected, her voice carrying a tone that immediately put everyone on alert, "I have to ask you about some of the choices you've made recently. There's been quite a bit of criticism about actors like yourself who seem to pick and choose when to be socially conscious." Michael's smile faltered slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I'm not sure I follow what you mean by that, Joy." "Well," Joy continued, her voice gaining momentum, "you talk about representation and giving voice to the voiceless. But then you work with directors and producers who have questionable track records when it comes to diversity." The other hosts exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction Joy was taking the conversation. Whoopi shifted in her seat, and Sarah's expression showed visible concern. "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization," Michael replied, his voice remaining steady, but with a hint of steel creeping in. "I've been very deliberate about the projects I choose and the people I work with. I can't control every decision that's made in this industry, but I can control my own actions and the stories I choose to tell." Joy wasn't backing down. "But don't you think that actors in your position have a responsibility to do more than just control your own actions? Don't you think you should be using your platform more aggressively to call out the problems in Hollywood instead of just talking about representation when it's convenient for your image?" The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Michael's jaw tightened visibly. And for the first time since sitting down, his polished media training seemed to crack. "Convenient for my image?" he repeated slowly. "Joy, I don't think you understand the work that I do behind the scenes or the conversations I have privately to create change in this industry." "Oh, but that's just it," Joy shot back, her voice rising slightly. "It's all behind the scenes and private conversations. Meanwhile, other actors are out there taking real risks, putting their careers on the line to speak out, and you're sitting pretty with your blockbuster deals." Whoopi finally intervened. "Joy, I think we should maybe—" "No, Whoopi, I think this is important." Joy cut her off. "The public deserves to know where their favorite stars really stand, not just the carefully crafted public relations version they get fed." Michael leaned back in his chair, clearly processing what was happening. The other hosts looked mortified, but Joy seemed energized by the confrontation she had created. "Joy, I think you're operating from a fundamental misunderstanding of who I am and what I stand for," Michael said, his voice now carrying an unmistakable edge. "Am I?" Joy challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like another Hollywood actor who talks a good game about social justice when the cameras are rolling, but plays it safe when it really matters." The studio audience, which had been relatively quiet, began to murmur. Some were clearly uncomfortable with Joy's aggressive approach, while others seemed engaged by the unexpected drama unfolding before them. Michael took a deep breath, and anyone who knew him well could see that he was reaching a breaking point. "You know what, Joy? I came here today expecting to have a conversation about my work, about the stories I'm trying to tell, about the positive impact I'm trying to make. Instead, you've decided to ambush me with accusations based on assumptions you've made about my character and my commitment to causes I care deeply about." "Ambush?" Joy laughed dismissively. "I'm asking the questions that your fans want answers to. I'm holding you accountable." "No," Michael said firmly, his voice rising for the first time. "You're grandstanding. You're creating conflict where none needs to exist because it makes for good television. And honestly, it's beneath what this show usually represents." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators were getting tighter shots, sensing that something significant was building. The other hosts sat frozen, unsure how to navigate the increasingly hostile exchange between their colleague and their guest. Joy's eyes flashed with what could only be described as satisfaction at having gotten under Michael's skin. "Oh, so now I'm grandstanding? That's interesting coming from someone whose entire career has been built on carefully managed public appearances and safe choices." "Safe choices?" Michael's voice dropped to a dangerously quiet level that anyone who knew him would recognize as a warning sign. "Joy, you clearly haven't done your homework. You want to talk about taking risks? Let's talk about the millions of dollars I've invested in Black-owned businesses. Let's talk about the production company I started, specifically to create opportunities for underrepresented filmmakers. Let's talk about the mentorship programs I fund that you've never bothered to research." Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Anyone with money can write checks, Michael. I'm talking about using your voice when it matters, when there are real consequences." "Real consequences?" Michael's composure was cracking further. "Do you have any idea what it's like to navigate this industry as a Black man, trying to create change while maintaining the relationships necessary to actually get projects made? Do you understand the delicate balance required to push boundaries without burning bridges that could help other people?" "That sounds like a convenient excuse to me," Joy shot back. "Other actors manage to speak truth to power without worrying about burning bridges." Sunny Hostin finally found her voice. "Joy, I think Michael raises some valid points about the complexity of creating change in Hollywood." "Oh, please, Sunny." Joy turned on her co-host with barely concealed irritation. "You're going to sit there and defend celebrity activism that amounts to nothing more than performance art?" Michael's hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Performance art? You want to call my work performance art? The families who've been helped by the housing initiatives I've funded might disagree with you. The young filmmakers who got their first breaks through my production deals might have a different perspective. And yet," Joy continued relentlessly, "when the biggest controversies hit Hollywood, when the real systemic issues come to light, where's your voice? Where are the Instagram posts? Where are the interviews calling out the power brokers by name?" "You want names?" Michael's voice was rising again. "You want me to call people out publicly? Fine. Let's talk about the executive who told me I was too urban for a leading role. Let's talk about the producer who suggested I'd be perfect for the drug dealer part but couldn't see me as the hero. Let's talk about the casting director who said audiences wouldn't connect with me as a romantic lead because I don't fit their idea of aspirational." The studio fell completely silent. Even Joy seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw honesty of his words. But Michael wasn't finished. "The difference between you and me, Joy, is that I understand that change happens through strategy, not just through shouting. I've been working within the system to change it, creating opportunities for others while building my own platform. But apparently that's not enough for you because it doesn't make for good sound bites." Joy quickly regrouped. "That's exactly my point. You talk about strategy and working within the system. But meanwhile, the system continues to operate exactly as it always has. How many Black directors have gotten major studio deals because of your behind-the-scenes strategy? How many Black writers have gotten green-lit projects? Are you seriously asking me to quantify the impact of my advocacy work on live television?" Michael shot back. "Do you want me to list names and dollar amounts? Do you want me to violate the privacy of people I've helped just to satisfy your need for concrete evidence? I want you to be honest about the limitations of your approach." Joy fired back. I want you to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, playing it safe and working within the system isn't creating the kind of revolutionary change that's needed. Whoopi made another attempt to intervene. Maybe we should take a breath here and... No, Whoopi. Michael cut her off, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. I think Joy wants to have this conversation, so let's have it. You want to talk about revolutionary change? Let's talk about how you, sitting in your privileged position on this show, think you have the right to lecture me about how I should use my platform. Let's talk about how you've decided that your understanding of activism is the only valid approach. Joy's mouth opened in apparent shock at being directly confronted. Excuse me? You heard me, Michael continued, his voice gaining strength. You're sitting there telling me that my work isn't meaningful enough, that my approach isn't radical enough, that my impact isn't visible enough for your standards. But what gives you the authority to make that judgment? What revolutionary changes have you spearheaded? What systemic barriers have you torn down? The other hosts were now completely frozen, watching the exchange with a mixture of fascination and horror. This was television gold. But it was also getting deeply personal, in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. Joy's face was flushing red. I've been calling out injustice on this show for years. I've never been afraid to speak truth to power, regardless of the consequences. Speaking truth to power from a comfortable television studio is not the same thing as putting your career and your financial security on the line to create actual change. Michael shot back. It's easy to be brave when your job security isn't at risk. It's easy to demand that others take risks when you're insulated from the consequences. How dare you question my commitment to social justice? Joy's voice was now shaking with anger. How dare you question mine? Michael fired back immediately. You don't know me. You don't know my story. You don't know the battles I've fought or the prices I've paid. You've sat here for the last 10 minutes making assumptions and accusations based on whatever narrative you've decided fits your agenda for today's show. The studio audience was no longer murmuring. They were sitting in stunned silence, witnessing what was clearly an unprecedented moment in the View's history. Joy's face was now completely red, her hands trembling slightly as she leaned forward in her chair. You know what, Michael? I think I've struck a nerve because you know I'm right. You know that you could be doing more, and instead of admitting it, you're attacking me. Attacking you? Michael's voice exploded with indignation. Attacking you? Joy, you invited me onto this show under the pretense of discussing my work, and then spent the entire segment trying to tear down everything I've accomplished. You've questioned my integrity, my commitment, and my character, and now you want to play the victim because I'm finally defending myself? The studio was electric with tension. Camera operators were capturing every micro-expression, every gesture, as this confrontation reached levels no one had anticipated. I'm not playing victim, Joy shot back. I'm doing my job as a journalist, asking the tough questions that need to be asked. Journalist? Michael let out a laugh that contained no humor whatsoever. Is that what you call this? Because what I'm witnessing looks more like character assassination disguised as journalism. You came into this conversation with your mind already made up about who I am and what I represent, and no amount of evidence to the contrary was going to change that. Sarah Haynes finally found the courage to speak. Maybe we should all just take a step back. No, Sarah, Michael interrupted, his intensity unwavering. Joy wanted this conversation, and we're going to finish it. Joy, you want to know what real activism looks like? It looks like the young black filmmaker who just got her first studio deal because I used my influence behind the scenes. It looks like the community center in Newark that exists because I didn't announce my donation on social media for publicity points. It looks like the scholarship program that's putting kids through film school right now. And yet you still work within a system that perpetuates inequality, Joy insisted, though her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. Of course I work within the system. Michael's voice was now controlled, but filled with barely contained fury. Because that's where the power island. That's where the decisions get made. That's where the money changes hands. You can stand outside the system and shout all you want, but if you want to actually change things, you have to be in the room where it happens. Joy scoffed. That's the same logic every complicit person in power has used throughout history. The word complicit hung in the air like a slap. Michael went completely still for a moment, and everyone in the studio could sense that something fundamental had just shifted. Complicit, Michael repeated slowly, his voice now dangerously quiet. You just called me complicit in perpetuating the very system that has tried to limit and define me since the day I walked into my first audition. You just accused me of being complicit in my own oppression and the oppression of my community. Joy seemed to realize she might have crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. If the shoe fits, Michael. That was the moment Michael B. Jordan truly erupted. The shoe fits? The shoe fits? Joy. Let me tell you something about shoes. I've walked in shoes you couldn't even imagine. I've walked into rooms where I was the only black face and had to prove I deserved to be there. I've walked into meetings where executives spoke about urban audiences like they were some exotic species they needed to study. I've walked into situations where my talent, my professionalism, and my humanity were constantly questioned. His voice was rising with each sentence. I've walked the walk while you've been sitting comfortably behind this desk talking the talk. And now you have the audacity to question whether I've walked far enough? To suggest that I'm complicit in the very system I've been fighting to change my entire career? Joy tried to interject, but Michael was in full flow now. You want to know what complicity looks like, Joy? Complicity looks like sitting in a position of privilege and influence, and using it to tear down the people who are actually doing the work. Complicity looks like creating division, where there should be solidarity. Complicity looks like demanding that black men perform their activism in ways that make you comfortable, instead of recognizing that there are multiple paths to creating change. Whoopi was desperately trying to signal the producers, but Michael wasn't finished. You've spent this entire interview trying to diminish everything I've accomplished, everything I stand for, and everything I've sacrificed to get where I am. And for what? For ratings? For controversy? To make yourself feel important by bringing down someone who's actually making a difference? Joy's composure was completely shattered now. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, she said, starting to remove her earpiece. Oh no, you don't get to walk away now, Michael said firmly. You started this conversation, Joy. You questioned my integrity, my commitment, and my character on national television. The least you can do is sit there and hear my response. This is completely unprofessional, Joy protested, but she remained in her seat. Unprofessional? Michael's voice cracked with disbelief. What's unprofessional is ambushing a guest with personal attacks. What's unprofessional is using your platform to spread divisive narratives instead of having genuine conversations. What's unprofessional is the way you've conducted yourself today. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael sat back in his chair, his chest rising and falling heavily, while Joy stared at him with a mixture of shock and indignation. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. Finally, Whoopi found her voice. Well, I think we've certainly had a very passionate discussion today. Michael turned to look directly into the camera. I came here today to talk about my work, about the stories I want to tell, about the positive impact entertainment can have on our world. Instead, I've been forced to defend my character and my integrity. But I want everyone watching to understand something. Creating change is not a performance. It's not about how loudly you shout or how many headlines you generate. It's about the work you do when the cameras aren't rolling, the relationships you build, and the opportunities you create for others. Joy sat in stunned silence as Michael continued speaking directly to the audience, completely ignoring her presence. I will continue to do that work, regardless of what anyone thinks about my methods or my approach. Because at the end of the day, results matter more than rhetoric, and impact matters more than image. As the show cut to commercial, the viral moment was already being born. Social media would explode with clips of the confrontation, with overwhelming support for Michael's passionate defense of his character and work. So what do you think? Was Michael B. Jordan right to defend himself so forcefully, or should he have taken the high road and stayed silent? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. The way celebrities handle these kinds of attacks says everything about their character, and this confrontation certainly revealed who both of these people really are.